Hello, I'm Todd Phillips, the editor of Canadian Auto Dealer. We're joined here today by Jeremy Gutsche. Jeremy is a New York Times bestselling author, the CEO of Trend Hunter, and billed as a chaos and an innovation expert. He's going to be one of the keynote speakers at the CADA Summit on February 3rd, 2021. Jeremy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on the show.
All right, Jeremy, well, we'd like a sneak preview of what you're going to be presenting at the event. I know dealers are going to be very curious to hear from you on the future and the impact of the pandemic, certainly innovation and what companies are doing to kind of adapt and make the best of it. So give us a little bit of a taste of what dealers can expect when you take the stage, the virtual stage, on February 3rd.
A lot of my work centers around the reality that you have more potential within your grasp, particularly as a successful person. However, there's certain traps of success that uniquely block you from realizing your full potential. So I'll give you a little background just so you can understand where I'm coming from. Basically, I was always an entrepreneur at heart, but I could never find my little idea. And I ended up as an innovation guy at a bank. I grew $1 billion business for them, which sounds good, but I still didn't find my idea. Maybe I should be a car dealer. That would be so much fun. I love cars. But how do I find the idea that was right for me? And I did two things. I coded up a website, which was a place for people to share ideas, called Trend Hunter, and it took off. It was an experiment, like a giant focus group. The traffic went from thousands to millions to billions, and now we work with several hundred brands, many of them in auto, on how to think about what's next. So we would do in auto hundreds and hundreds of trend reports, advising everyone from Tesla to Hino trucks on what are some of the new trends that could impact the designs, the inside, the outside. So I'm familiar with the world from that standpoint. But the other side of things, which gets a little bit more personal to your success, is that in 2008, I had written my first bestseller, and it was a book called Exploiting Chaos, which was about how times of chaos create opportunity. And I became the chaos guy for all these Fortune 500 CEOs, because you help one or two, you get to help the next one, the next one, the next one. And pretty soon I'd worked with several hundred brands, billionaires, and CEOs on how to think of times of chaos. And I learned a lot from each one, but in particular, what I study is how your success, the fact that you've got a great dealership, that it's working, that it's been, generating money and working out so well and connecting with your community and pushing out great automobiles, that success causes a series of particular traps which cause us to cling to the status quo. And the metaphor I like to use is the hunter versus the farmer. And it's this concept that we've been hunting for 1 million years, but 10,000 years ago, when people planted the first seed, it pre-wired us to repeat and optimize whatever led to last year's harvest. In particular, that means for successful people, there is a series of traps that cause us to miss out on new opportunities. And you're also entrepreneurial, so you're well familiar with the fact you don't want those traps kicking in. So we're going to help you think about what impacts you, and then show you how to think more disruptively to extract better thinking from yourself and your team. And I'm going to be playing at a high level. I recognize you're smart and successful people, and I'm going to walk you through the same tactics I would use if I, sitting down with a Fortune 500 CEO, a billionaire, or a world leader, to help them think about how to take their high level of performance higher.
Well, it's interesting. You use the analogy of the farming and planting the seed, and there's a lot of talk of the new normal. Most people are pretty tired of that term by now. But really, returning to the new normal is a sense of comfort, almost, as you say, to get another good harvest out of it. And how do people avoid that temptation to just glide back into business as usual, to kind of get a sense of a new baseline of normalcy or stability in a world that, and frankly, in the last year has been more chaotic than most of us have seen?
Sure. And I think there's a couple interesting points to really dissect there. Now, on one hand, we want stability. So the wording here using there is the important ground you can walk on is what we're looking for. But there is also a note that the world doesn't get back to any given exact sense of a normal as it was before. The way that I like to think about it, which is very useful as we dream of 2021 and 2022, is that when you have a crisis-induced chaos, what we're going through now, crisis and chaos are actually different stages. So we go from a period of path dependency, where we're clinging to that path we're on, to a crisis, which is, let's say, this mode right now where we're working from home and we can't do stuff. And then we get to chaos and we end up recharted on a new path. Here's what I mean by that differentiation. Right now, you can't exactly totally reinvent your business or know what things look like, because your end consumers, your customers are in their houses, unable to go to work, looking after the kids, trying to figure out things that are on the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The concern right now is not really my car. And if it is, maybe it's because I'm in one of the few industries where things are going really well or really poorly, and I need to switch it up. But what happens after this phase of crisis is we enter a period where we're able to go out of the house, able to work, all that stuff again. But after enduring a year of working from home, consumer needs entirely reshuffle. We are in a mind frame where we're willing to try new things, where we've reevaluated what's important and why. And that creates a little bit of a land grab, a reprioritization that makes 2021 really different and exciting. So right now, you want to be preparing yourself, understanding those traps of success, how they impact you. And then when we get to 2021, it's a year of reshuffling, disrupt or be disrupted. And so I want to provoke you to think about how to be one of the disruptors, not the disrupted, as we think about a world of changing consumer mindsets and preferences, which would be the year ahead.
It's interesting when you look at the roots of innovation. You mentioned, Tesla and other companies that you've worked with in the past. It seems that some people have an ability to see bits of chaos or scramble bits of information and assemble them in something that seems pretty clear. For the rest of us, looking back on history, seemed obvious at the time, but wasn't at all obvious, to most of us. So how do the true innovators kind of grasp, assembling that roadmap ahead, and they just seem to sort of have ways to see things before the people, and then they act preemptively and do much better. So how can we program ourselves to do that kind of thing?
I'm glad where you're walking into it, because what we're going to walk through would be the 7 traps of path dependency, which are related to the idea of traps. But path dependency is this concept that you cling to the path that you're on. It's from the 50s or 60s. But when you think about it in terms of innovation and change, there's a couple traps that really line up to the question that you're getting at. How come some people see and others don't? In part, it's by trying to look inward at the traps that impact you. And success is an issue. So why can Tesla see the future of electric automobiles? I guess it's because they weren't in the industry. They didn't have a dealer network. They weren't already in it and confined in making choices by trying to preserve what was already there. So often being an outsider can be helpful. But the trap that's the most impactful then, if I think of myself being a dealer or any of the other sort of players in the market, is the subtlety of disruptive ideas. And it's this trap that your industry, your dealership, your community, the way to market in the way that it's worked up until 2019. The subtlety of disruptive idea trap is that the new ways of doing things, the new opportunities, can seem more clumsy or awkward to the people that have been in the market. So Smith Corona invented the laptop word processor and the computer, or the laptop computer, but it seemed clumsy and weird. And so when times are tough, they abandoned it and they continued making typewriters because that's where the good money was. Xerox invented the personal computer, but then they abandoned it. They invented the graphic user interface, the mouse. They did nothing with it for a decade because they were making really good money in photocopiers. This is the nuance. You've heard these brands, but the nuance is important. And when Kodak invents the digital camera in 1975, they're just making so much money with the old school silver halide photography that why bother with this clumsy machine? So there are certain tactics you can do, recognizing that your success causes you to overestimate control, overappreciate the current path, so that you can better tease out what are some of the new ideas which actually have an impact. And so we'll walk through 7 of those traps. We've talked now a little bit about the hunter-farmer, which is one, which is the trap of success. We've talked about the subtlety of disruptive ideas, but we'll go trap by trap and I'll sort of explain how they work, showcase or demonstrate them to you, and then we'll get into some of the tactics that you can do with your team to sort of counteract the things that are holding you back from realizing your success. And you know what? If we're talking in 2017 or 18 and your dealership was working really well and you could predict into the future, then some of this would be, inspiring. But if we're talking, but not like transformational. But if we're talking about this year of global pandemic and then entering a new year where people will rethink about what's important, then this is going to be important for you to really think about with your team so that you can really win, when the deck gets reshuffled and the market leaders switch around.
Well, I appreciate you giving us some insights. I think the message will be well received because you're actually breaking it down, the chaos, the disruption, into things that people can do as leaders, looking at their own role in it and how they embrace all this change and the forces of change instead of just being overwhelmed by it and learning the global trends they feel they can't do much about. So it's very interesting. It's a very personal message that, each of us has that ability, as you say, to unlock more potential. So I'm sure the dealers will be very keen to hear more of it. I'll stop you there because I don't want to give away the whole full meal deal. We want to make sure people tune in on February 3rd for the CADA Summit. But Jeremy, thanks for joining us today. That was great.
All right. Thank you very much. See you at the summit.
Okay, will do. Thanks. Signing off.